Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, spoke before the UN General Assembly this week.
I heard there weren't the auditorium was 2/3 empty when he spoke.
Probably some people retired to their hotel rooms for the prostitutes that had been procured for them. Big business for prostitutes in New York City this weekend. That was documented by the New York Post. We brought that to you.
Well, you got to go where the work is.
I understand. Follow the politicians. Yeah. UN's Sustainable Development Goals Summit. And Zelensky, who is in the midst of trying to repel the Russian invasion, was very thoughtful in taking time out to repeat the lines he was dutifully given from Western climate czars like John Kerry. Here's what he said.
Even though humanity is failing on its climate policy objectives, this means that extreme weather will still impact the normal global life, and some evil state will also weaponize its outcomes. And when people in the streets of New York and other cities of the world went out on climate protest, we all have seen them. And when people in Morocco and Libya and other countries die as a result of natural disasters, and when islands and countries disappear underwater, and when tornadoes and deserts are spreading into new territories, and when all of this is happening, one unnatural disaster in Moscow decided to launch a big war and kill tens of thousands of people. We have to stop it. We must act united to defeat the aggressor and focus all our capabilities and energy on addressing these challenges. As nukes are restrained, likewise the aggressor must be restrained, and all his tools and methods of war. Each war now can become final, but it takes our unity to make sure that aggression will not break in again. And it is not a dialogue between the so-called great powers somewhere behind the closed doors that can guarantee us all the new wars era, but open war of all nations for peace.
You know what that reminds me of? The whole scene. A story we brought you earlier in the week about this volleyball team in Brazil. Women's volleyball team. They won some sort of collegiate title, I guess. And the male students, some male students, medical students in Brazil, in celebration, of the championship victory, pulled down their pants, ran out on the court, and had a group masturbation celebration.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, this is that scandal has risen to the level of Lulu, the president of Brazil. Anyway, that's what the UN convention there reminds me of. One big group masturbation celebration.
Just call it a circle jerk. Right?
Well, yeah, that is the term of art. I hope that's not too graphic for our next guest, but it just popped into my head. Bjorn Lomborg is the president of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank, author of Best Things First. Bjorn, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So,
even if it's the most unusual introduction I've had.
Yeah, well, I like to chart new territory. So Zelensky's going full Greta before his UN friends there. How did you receive that? First of all, just on the facts, I know you sort of just like to keep it substantive based on the policy, which is fair. Is anything he said correct?
So look, I have a lot of understanding of Zelensky. Basically, wants a lot of military aid, and he's obviously playing to whatever audience is there. But I think fundamentally, we have to remember that there are many problems in this world. And there's a beautiful sort of ideal in the UN that they're actually trying to look at all of the things that humanity is facing. And it's great to have someone think about this, but very often they end up then focusing on a few things that sort of catch the public eye and catches everyone's attention. And of course, right now, that is global warming. Now, global warming is a real problem, but it really is only one of many issues. And it's probably the place where you can spend the most money and still achieve almost the least benefit for humanity. So maybe we should be more concerned with many of these other things that you might not hear so much about, but where you could do immense good at very low cost. And so that's what I've been trying to tell the UN. I'm up here in New York right now. Talking about the fact that there's still 300,000 moms that die each year in pregnancy. There's 2.3 million kids that die every year in the first 28 days on the planet. And this we could do something about incredibly cheaply: tuberculosis, malaria, education, agricultural R&D, nutrition. There are all these things that we could do a lot about if we focused on that. And so my point is to say maybe a little less on the scare pedal on climate and a little more on sort of some of the really smart things we can do.
Yeah, a little humility would go a long way, particularly against the backdrop of how all of these global leaders managed COVID and the decisions that were made in the West and the East and the North and the South, everywhere. A little humility on grand plans to save the planet. Maybe just do a little things very, like you say, a few things very well, that immediate things that we know we could fix with resources that were directed and expertise that was deployed, that we could actually save lives rather than trying to save the planet. We're too busy saving the planet to actually help anybody, it seems.
Yeah, and Dan, just to nitpick, doing these things, for instance, fixing tuberculosis is not a small thing. It's 1.4 million people that die each and every year that we could help. So I think it's even more fair to say right now we're talking a lot about climate and we have virtually no impact at very large cost. So this year we're likely to spend upwards of $1.7 trillion on climate policies, and yet we'll have virtually no measurable impact, certainly by mid-century. Whereas if we spent just a tiny fraction, we're literally talking about thousands of that, we could have a huge impact on tuberculosis and nutrition, on malaria, on all of these things that actually are the big problems for most people on this planet. Again, remember, we live in very, very privileged societies. We're a couple of billion people who live very good lives on this planet, but there's still, 6 billion people who could do so much better. And so we really need to get our priorities right. And again, say, with limited money, let's do the stuff that actually works first.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world of scarcity, and there's always more demand for something that's good than there is supply. And so, use your resources wisely.
Exactly.
169 promises, the commitments, the emanating from the UN. I mean,
sustainable development goals.
Yeah. So it seems to me like, let's just the more promises we make, the more constituents, the more boxes of constituent groups we can check off. And then we don't actually have to do anything because, I mean, who can keep track of all these promises and whatever happened to them?
Yeah. Oh, there's certainly. So, the UN in that sense are just like politicians. They love to promise everything to everyone. Of course, it sounds good, but literally promising everything to everyone also means that you just end up spreading whatever few resources you have very, very thinly across everything. And as you just pointed out, mostly in climate, which feels good and makes a lot of good talking points, but actually is a very ineffective way to help. And then there's virtually nothing left over to all the others. So again, what we've tried to do, and what my new book, the Best Things First, tries to map out, is we have good evidence that 12 amazing things, so the things we just talked about, but also land tenure security and education, obviously one of the important things. But if you focus very smartly and very directly on things we know how to do, you could actually do immense good. So instead of spending $3 trillion or whatever it is, that's a fashionable number people are talking about, we suggest you could spend $35 billion. So literally 1/100th of what a lot of these do-gooders is talking about for $35 billion a year, we could save 4.2 million lives each and every year. And we could make the poor half of the world $1.1 trillion richer. This is simply the best things that we can do. This is not some pie in the sky. This is not something that we need to have a big ideological conversation about. These are simply very basic, incredibly good things that we could do to make life on Earth much better.
Was there any update on the state of the UN World Food Program? I remember, I think Cindy McCain is the director of it right now, which is interesting. But the previous director, I think his name is David Beasley, during the lockdowns, when the lockdowns started happening in the West during COVID, he said, look, you do not lock down. Please do not lock down, because you're going to disrupt the supply chains. And we could go from 10 million people starving to death each year to 25 or 30 million. And, again, dire predictions, and I like to follow up on them to see where we're at. Does anybody know? Does anybody care about what was said about the World Food Program on all these countries, including the United States, that provide resources to provide food, to provide to people who are, need the food? And so what happened? Where's the food program stand today? How many people are we serving? How many people died? Is anybody making those assessments? Anybody care about that?
I don't know. What I do know is that, and so I can't inform you on that particular one, but very clearly, locking down poor countries was a really bad idea. If you're a rich country, you can have a reasoned conversation about whether you should lock down. I went through COVID in Sweden, and I've got to say that was a pretty good experience. We can have a reasonable conversation about that, but it was just simply dumb to do this in poor countries. They're younger, so they're less at risk. And very clearly, they have huge costs involved in locking down, especially as we've now seen. Locking down schools was just horrible. And, the World Bank and many others estimate this will end up costing the world in the order of $1.7 trillion in lost incomes by 2040 every year, just simply because the kids around the world have lost about 9 months of schooling on average. That's just a terrible outcome. So again, we need to be careful what we actually do. Policies have real world impacts. And again, let's do not the dumb stuff that doesn't deliver very much, but let's do the smart stuff that's actually incredibly cheap, very effective, and will help a lot of people. So again, on nutrition and on feeding the world, because there's still 700-800 million people who go undernourished. The simple solution is to have, if you remember back from the 1960s, we had a green revolution that basically made wheat and corn and rice produce much more per acre. That was a fantastic thing. We need a second green revolution just like that, where you make better yielding varieties. That you can do this very cheaply with researchers. And that means that people, especially in the poor Africa part, can do much better on every acre that they grow, giving more food to people. You have fewer people that make more food, so that it also becomes cheaper in urban centers. This is just simply good policy all around. Again, it's not as sexy as talking about climate, but it just happens to be incredibly effective.
Bjorn Lomborg is the president of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank. His new book he was just describing, Best Things First. Best Things First is Bjorn Lomborg's new book. Pick it up. Bjorn, thanks as always for your time. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you.
Talk to you. Take care. He joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
School has started. The nights are getting cooler. The sun is getting lower on the horizon every day. Winter is coming, and coming fast. Keeping your business's doors and gates working properly to keep out the extreme weather is a major concern. Your business can't afford a loss of income or productivity. Think ahead before Old Man Winter arrives and call Industrial Door Company of Chicago, Inc. for your commercial door maintenance and security tune-up now. You can't always plan when your doors break down, and it always seems to come at the least